Hello there YouTube, Devin here again. Today we're going to be doing something I've done on the channel before, but now I'm going to be able to show you a little bit closer, a little bit easier, a little bit better angles. We're going to be showing you basically how to take apart an SMLE today to check for replacement parts and stuff like that, if anything needs to be taken care of on your SMLE. Thankfully, the SMLE is a fairly easy rifle to take apart. There are much easier ones out there, but it's fairly intuitive. This happens to be my Ishapur Model 41, which is the 410 model shotgun. Now, if you look there, this one was done in, it says 410 RFI 1949, so this one was done in 1949. It's built off of a Ishapur 1933 dated SMLE. It is all numbers matching, even the bolt, so we're all set. The only thing that I've had to replace on this so far when I got it, and I got it for cheap, is the buttstock here was pretty well rotted out because it had been just leaning against a wall in a basement for a while, and it basically kind of ate away at the wood, kind of rotted it. It was basically sitting in 4 inches of water up to here for the most part, the stock was. So it was kind of destroyed, but I was able to salvage the original butt plate off of it, but it's a good thing I had a spare buttstock, and it's a little bit lighter than the rest of the rifle, but it looks like it was meant to be there for the most part, so which is kind of cool. So I didn't expect it to match up that well. But other than that, I haven't been inside this rifle yet to see what all needs to be replaced. There's always a few screws, and every single one I've seen, there's always a few screws that are going to be stripped, and I'll let you know that and all that other good stuff. But we're going to show you how to take this apart today, just so you can make sure that your parts are well oiled, properly maintained, and everything like that. YouTube really doesn't like videos like this because basically they think I'm teaching you guys how to build a firearm. I'm not really doing that. I understand where they're coming from with that though. But it's more of I do these even though I really can't monetize these videos because YouTube does think I'm showing you guys how to assemble a firearm. I'm doing it just to make sure people are safe and to hopefully save you a little bit of money. So that way if you are concerned about it, you should be able to look over all these parts and everything like that and make sure everything's okay yourself rather than having to take it to a gunsmith and pay them to do it. I'm teaching you how to properly maintain and take care of these old pieces of history yourself in a safe and very easy to do fashion. So that way you can continue preserving them for future generations and make sure they're going to stay in their optimal condition. Because a lot of these rifles, they don't have parts around anymore. The SMLE does, and a lot of other surplus rifles do, but parts are getting less and less, and they're getting more and more expensive every year. So if you maintain them, they're going to last a lot longer. So we're going to switch the camera around here, and I'm going to show you how to kind of take everything apart off this, check it out, we'll look at it and everything, see if there's any pitting, any corrosion that we need to take care of, any screws that need to be replaced, any parts that look kind of worn out. We're going to do that whole thing basically as far as we need to. So for a basic check, we're not going to take the bolt apart. I do have a video on taking the bolt apart. If you are interested in that, that is a separate video. And we're not going to be taking the buttstock off because I know that that's fine. That's real easy to do though. I'll just explain it here. You just open this and you get a really long flathead screwdriver and you unscrew a screw that's located about here that screws into this collar part of the receiver. And we can just skip that and get that out of the way. That's not something you normally take off when you're maintaining the rifle anyways. It's not really an integral part to make sure it's working and functioning safely. So it's not really something that's taken off most of the time anyways. But without further ado, we'll flip the camera around here and we'll get to disassembling this thing for you and showing you what all needs to be replaced, because I'm just as anxious as you guys are to see what this thing looks like underneath its wood. So stay tuned for that. Alrighty, so here we are, unfortunately on the floor because I don't really have anything with as good a lighting as this area and everything like that, so I'm kind of contorting myself to make sure the audio is good and you guys can see everything. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take the sling off, alright? And the sling is just as easy as pinching this, the cotton underneath here. And it'll rotate right out, so you just got to pinch like this and it should slip out right here, and then we can get this just loose enough. You don't really need to take it all the way off, but we want it loose just to make sure that it's not going to get into our way. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to remove the bolt, which is as simple as lifting up the bolt handle, retracting it all the way to the back, rotating the bolt head up. So for those of you who can't see that there, all right, so here's the bolt head right here. And all you're going to do is you're just going to grab it and you're going to pry it up. This can be quite stiff on a lot of them, depending on how new your bolt head is and how new the spring is right here. And this spring's going to be important later because this is what keeps the bolt head from coming off this little guide track that runs along the whole length of the receiver. And so once your bolt head is up, you can retract it out of the way, and there's your bolt removed. Set that out of the way. All right, now the next thing we're going to want to do in disassembling this is we're going to want to remove the nose cap. Now the SMLE has this very kind of iconic nose cap, and there's really only 2 screws you need to take off to remove it. So there's one here on the side, that is just a flathead screw, and then there's one here on the bottom, which is also just another flathead screw. So you just want to start undoing these. They're pretty easy. They might be stuck with dry cosmoline and stuff like that, so just make sure that you don't force anything that's not supposed to go. A lot of these SMLEs are made with kind of softer steel, so you've got to make sure you don't over torque these screws, because you'll strip them very easy, which is the problem we're going to have with, I guarantee it, and I'll point it out to you when we get to the inside of it. I guarantee there's going to be this one screw that's always stripped, and it's a huge problem. So now that both those screws are out, you should just be able to slide this off, get some leverage. You might need to tap on it to get it free, because once again, kind of like this one, there's a lot of, as you can see, kind of built up grease underneath there, but there's your nose cap removed. So another thing you have to be careful for with these types of rifles is there is these little springs that are in here to help kind of bed the barrel and stuff like that. Be very careful, because mine doesn't fall out because of all the grease, but there's a good portion of them that if you rotate the rifle over will just fall free and can be lost very easily. There is replacements available out there, and they make reproductions of them, but if you don't have to lose those, just be very careful, because there's a couple spots on the underside of this rifle where there is these little barrel bedding springs that can just fall right out of the stock if you're not paying attention. So mine won't, like I said, but just be careful of that. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to remove the now front barrel band, which is once again just another flathead screw. And the cool thing about the SMLE is the vast majority of them are hinged. So once you take the swivel out, you can just kind of pry this apart, and as you can see, it's hinged there to make it come off very easily. And then your upper handguards now just come free. And so first inspection here into this barrel, you can see all this kind of it's not very shiny or smooth or blued looking. It has this kind of textured look to it, and that's that paint that the Indians put on it that makes it corrosion resistant. And this looks to be a very, very well intact barrel as far as that goes, because it's blued and then it has this kind of enamel paint put over it, kind of like the French used to do with their rifles. So okay, so now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to lift the rear sight up all the way, okay? And then there is this, a lot of people, you got to be very careful with these rear upper handguards here, because you see these 2 little wings on the side here. They're very thin because they run along the front sight base. I mean, the rear sight base, so you have to be very careful with them, but we're just going to slide a screwdriver underneath here, and we're just going to kind of pry that spring up. As you can see, it flew off there. This little spring clip is what holds the rear handguard on, so like I said, just be very careful that you're not breaking these off. You oftentimes will see a lot of these just cut off of both the handguards, because they're not really necessary and they were so prone to breaking. But if you have them intact, it's good to keep those intact as part of the rifle. It is part of the history, and they would have all been issued that way. All right, so now A lot of people seem to think that you need to pull this screw out. You don't need to pull this screw out. This is just a cross screw to reinforce the stock to prevent it from cracking when firing for a prolonged amount of time. Now, once again, behind the rear handguard, we still have this awesome intact enamel paint. Can't see any pitting or anything yet so far, but a lot of that actually comes underneath the barrel. The top of the barrel usually doesn't have a lot of pitting. You normally tend to see it kind of right here along the sides where the two pieces of wood meet and stuff like that. But this one seems to be looking pretty good so far. All right. Next thing we want to do, okay, is you see this little collar right here. This is again one of those things that helps bed the barrel. We want to take that out, which is just a flathead screw right there, as you can see in the stock. We're just going to undo that, tip it over. It should just tap free. Now, once again, you see that there's a spring in there, okay, to help bed the barrel. You might not be able to see it, but there's a spring in there that you don't want to lose. So be careful that that doesn't fall out with your screw, because it very well could. Once again, a lot of my stuff is pretty well frozen in the stock with grease, it looks like. So next thing we're going to do is you don't need to remove this screw. This screw, the only thing it's doing is holding in the rear sight base, the rear sight protector leaves. You don't need to remove that one. That one can stay in the stock unless it needs some oil. So the only things we're really going to need to do now to take the rifle entirely apart is this little screw right here, flathead screw, back of the trigger guard, and this big one right here at the front of the floor plate. So we will undo that. Perfect, perfect. And then just that little one right there at the back of the floor plate. We'll undo that as well. Once again, you do not want to force these. They are pretty soft steel, and they will tend to break on you or strip out or anything like that. So just be very, very careful with these. This one's only threaded a little bit of the way, so you don't need to do a ton. All right, and then you should be able to, the little wiggling, free your floor plate and trigger, rotate your rifle over, grab underneath the trigger guard here, maybe with a little bit of finagling. There you go. Stock comes right off. See, the stock has a lot of grease in it. Stock's looking pretty good though. A couple little cracks here and there, but that's all right. It's not uncommon for something this old and used and abused as hard as it is. So you can see the little barrel bushing up there. And so now here we go. We'll take this over to the other view now, and we'll take a look at this a little bit more in depth, and I'll explain to you what screws are normally stripped out on this, so stay tuned for that. Alrighty, so I was indeed correct. Now, after looking here under the underside of the barrel, see the light shining this way, it's much easier to tell. There's no pitting or corrosion or anything on it. This enamel paint was put on it, basically what looked like to be near pristine condition. So it's very, very good. There's no pitting, corrosion, or anything underneath it. The barrel matches. All the markings are still visible for the most part. Some of the shallower ones are not. But like I wanted to tell you guys, because this is the Ishapore Model 410, you can see the 4 little rivets there that are holding this permanently attached follower in place. But this screw right here, every single SMLE I've ever seen is stripped out. Now, that screw is a really important screw because it is the screw that holds in place the sear that releases the bolt when you're going to fire. A lot of people, it's under a lot of pressure, that screw is. So a lot of them are stripped out because guys just torque on them too hard, but they are very soft metal. And then it's also the screw that has the bolt head retention spring in. Every single SMLE I've seen, these are stripped out. They are still available and everything like that. Other than that, a lot of the screws that are normally kind of culprits for being stripped out were good. There was not a lot of marring or anything on them. It looks like the ejector screw starting to strip out a little bit of marring, and of course the safety retention screw is a little bit of marring. But other than that, this thing seems to be in relatively good shape. It needs just a little bit of grease and everything else like that. But other than that, it seems to, if we look at the safety functions and works, very well greased. The sear is fine. Not a lot of deformation or anything on the sear. But like that screw right there is going to have to be replaced. I'm going to have to replace that, which might take a little bit of grinding, and I may have to get a new bolt head retention spring, unfortunately, because a lot of the grinding you're going to have to do to make a deep enough cut now in order to remove this screw is going to have to also go through the bolt head retention spring, which will be a project for another day. But I'm very, very pleased with the overall condition of this rifle, especially after the guy I bought it from said it went through a flood and it sat in some water for quite a long time. Thankfully, that really only hurt the wood. The metal seems to be all good. This thing probably hasn't been cleaned. I don't know if it was ever cleaned or taken apart since it left India, basically, because yeah, it's a little bit interesting. But overall, I'm very pleased with this purchase. I got it for a good deal and all that other good stuff. And I think now we'll put it together. Hopefully, you guys are now able to take apart your SMLE, check for everything like that, make sure it's under condition. This is all you need now too, is you just take a rag with some oil on it and stuff like that and just run it up and down the barrel and everything. Keep it really good. If you really want to go the extra mile, put grease around the barrel where the wood touches it, just to keep it, because wood tends to retain moisture, which a lot of people seem to forget. When you're buying a rifle, that wood expands and contracts with moisture in the atmosphere. So even if you don't get the wood wet, like wet, or bring it out in the rain or something like that, the wood just absorbs moisture depending on climate and condition and stuff like that. So if you're in the desert, you probably don't need to do that. But if you're living somewhere more humid, such as like Florida or somewhere along the coasts or something like that, you're going to want to probably put some grease around the barrel and chamber and bottom parts of the receiver and stuff like that, just to make sure no moisture from that wood is seeping against the metal, because oftentimes the way the grain is on the wood, it ends along the metal and stuff here, especially along the back part of your SMLE here, where two different end pieces of the stock are touching this collar. You want to make sure you have a lot of grease along there, because moisture travels with the grain in the wood. So just make sure that you're taking care of it, disassembling, checking it. Even if I don't use my rifle or shotgun or whatever, I like to take it apart every 6 months, just to check that everything's going okay and it still has grease and oil. There's no dry spots, there's no moisture building up, because I do live in a relatively humid environment here in the summer. So normally I like to check kind of at the end of winter, when things are kind of the driest usually, and make sure that it has enough grease and the grease is absorbing into the wood, which is going to help prevent moisture from from leaking out of the wood later. And I want to then make sure normally kind of at the end of summer to make sure that there's no moisture building up, that the stock isn't swelling too much and having uneven spots that are touching the wood and stuff like that. Things like that are good to check when you're supposed to be keeping these things protected and everything like that. So hopefully you learned a little bit of something and everything like that. And I encourage you guys to take yours apart and try. Now normally a lot of people say don't take apart your SMLE because it will affect the bedding. The vast majority of them are bedded like absolute crap anyways, so I wouldn't really be too worried about it affecting your accuracy overall. And besides, most people can't shoot as well as the SMLE can even shoot anyways, even with its terrible bedding. So I wouldn't really be too worried about it. If you have a number 4 on the other hand, that is something you want to be very, very careful taking apart, because those are bedded a very specific way and they have a free floated barrel, and that's going to affect your accuracy a lot more than taking one of these apart. And this one's also a shotgun, so I'm not really worried about the bedding on it because it's a shotgun. As long as it has a decent spread, which is basically all the barrel, not anything to do with the bedding, it'll be fine. It's a shotgun. But hopefully you learned something here and all that other cool stuff, and you now are confident enough to take one of these apart, because this hopefully will get a little bit better and in-depth and stuff like that. So I'm gonna end the video here after a couple announcements and stuff like that. So sorry I didn't have the video out yesterday. I had to replace the alternator in my car. I don't know anything about cars, but it was simple enough to do. Saved myself $300 something basically in labor, but still out like $500 between the battery and the alternator, trying to figure out what it was exactly that was wrong with my electrical system. So, but that'll be kind of hard to recoup over the next couple months, but I'll manage it just fine. But if you do want to contribute to the channel, which is going to help me continue to do stuff like this, not have to have me use so much money out of pocket, which means I could pay that off a little quicker, please consider donating to the Patreon. As little as $1 a month with a lifetime donation will get you into the Discord, where you can meet all of these fantastic people. We've been having a lot of really interesting conversations lately over the last couple of days, and all that other good stuff on the Discord. So if that's something you're interested in, it's also the best way to get a hold of me, see stuff that I put up for sale before anyone else. If you're interested in buying one of the helmets I have owned, I recently just sold the ECH that me and Mike shot in a ballistic test, which is fantastic. I'll be able to get that out here, well, probably next payday when I get enough money to print shipping labels. So now that I'm out, $500. So, but if that's something you're doing, I'll leave a link that you could just copy and paste into your browser right into the description of the channel. It means the world to me. Every little bit helps, especially with how expensive it is to do all these hobbies, and that money goes a long ways, especially since the YouTube algorithms are so messed up and they hardly pay me anything. Most of my money comes from Patreon. All like $50 a month or something I get from you guys goes a long ways to really helping me get parts to make sure these stay, and providing the content to show you how to replace these parts and maintain everything and do stuff like this. It goes a long ways to help me do that. So thank you so much for watching, you guys, and hopefully I will see all of you all in the next video.